Hello and welcome to another Mr. Carter Science Special. In this video we'll be looking at the kidney and in particular how dialysis works. As always, keep your eyes open for the learning outcomes and the specification links. So we'll begin by thinking about a healthy kidney and how it produces urine. The kidney filters blood and then reabsorbs all of the glucose, some of the mineral salt ions and some of the water. The excess mineral salts, the urea and the remaining water form a solution called urine, and the urine is then released into the bladder ready for excretion. So there we've got at least a 4-mark answer to how a healthy kidney produces urine. But what happens if your kidney is damaged? Well, the kidney can be damaged by pathogenic infections or physical damage from an accident. And in some people, genetic conditions can cause the kidney to fail. Failure of both kidneys will lead to a buildup of toxins in the blood like urea and a buildup of salts and mineral ions, and this will disrupt the osmotic balance of the body, causing cells to lose water and crenate, as you can see in the diagram below. This will eventually lead to death. However, modern medicine offers two possible treatments, and in this video we're going to look at the first treatment, dialysis, and in a separate video we will also be looking at transplants, kidney transplants. So dialysis occurs when a dialysis machine carries out the normal functions of the kidney. When a patient undergoes dialysis, their blood leaves the body and goes through the dialysis machine, and you can see that here where the blood is entering the dialysis machine. In the machine, the blood flows between a partially permeable membrane. You may have used this membrane in your classes. It's often known as Viscin tubing. On the other side of these membranes is a dialysis fluid containing the same concentration of useful substances as the blood of a healthy person. The waste urea and the excess water and mineral salts will therefore diffuse out of the blood and into the dialysis fluid. Dialysis will only ever utilize diffusion. It cannot use active transport. And of course, if you get the concentrations correct, then water will also follow. Any excess water will follow by osmosis. However, after dialysis, the urea and salts will also build up again, so dialysis needs to be carried out at regular intervals, up to 3 times a week, and dialysis can take up to 8 hours per session. So patients must carefully manage their diets to keep their blood chemistry as stable as possible. If you do have to undergo dialysis, this will be a huge lifestyle change to you, as you're going to have to carry out and give up your job for those 8 hours 3 times a week. You won't be able to socialize for those times. You won't be able to spend time with your family. So this is not a simple treatment at all. So in your textbook you may have seen a diagram similar to this explaining how dialysis works. However, I prefer this diagram taken from an exam question. In dialysis, patients need to lose urea and excess mineral ions without losing useful substances like glucose and some of the mineral ions. To allow this, the concentration of the dialysis fluids are carefully controlled. So just to explain this diagram here, you can see the patient's blood is travelling through the dialysis membrane or the Viscin tubing, and then surrounding that blood is the dialysis fluid, and of course this is happening in 3D, so the fluid is completely surrounding the Viscin tubing, and the dialysis fluid will enter here and exit here. The dialysis fluid will contain absolutely no urea, so that's a very low concentration of urea. And of course in the blood you will have quite a high concentration of urea, and therefore the urea will diffuse out of the blood and into the dialysis fluid. Now this is diffusion, so it will stop at equilibrium, so you will still have a small amount of urea left in the patient's blood, but over 50% will have been removed through the dialysis fluid in this process. Dialysis fluid also contains exactly the same concentration of glucose and mineral ions that are found in the blood of a normal healthy human. This means that there will be no net movement of glucose out of the blood, because we'll have the same concentration of glucose here in the blood and here in the dialysis fluid. Yes, we may get some diffusion going into the blood and some diffusion going out, but their movements will balance out. We will have no net movement of glucose in and out of the blood. Therefore, glucose, the same concentration of glucose, will be retained in the blood as it returns to the patient. Dialysis also contains the dialysis fluid also contains normal levels of mineral ions. So due to a build-up of salts in the blood, but will actually be quite a high concentration of salt mineral ions in the blood, but just a normal concentration of mineral ions in the dialysis fluid. So in comparison, that will actually be lower than the blood, and therefore those mineral ions are going to diffuse out of the blood and into the dialysis solution, into the dialysis fluid, down the diffusion gradient, thus removing those ions from the blood as the blood flows back into the patient. So excess mineral ions, salt, water and urea will diffuse through the dialysis membrane, the viscin tubing, from the blood into the dialysis fluid, and therefore when the blood returns to the patient, it will have its normal body chemistry for the next few days until those waste ions build up again. Now if we go back and look at this diagram, we can also see a few extra extra features of a dialysis machine. The dialysis machine will add blood thinners into the blood to prevent it clotting as the blood flows through the machine. The blood will also flow through not just one but a number of tubes, thus increasing the surface area and therefore increasing the rate of diffusion of the minerals and the urea out of the blood. And before the blood goes back into the person, it will go through a bubble trap to get rid of any bubbles, because if you end up with bubbles of air within your blood, it can kill you, and this is a very, very serious issue. The advantages of dialysis are clear. Dialysis will keep people with kidney failure alive. There's no need to wait for a donor organ, and there's no need for immunosuppressant drugs that can leave you vulnerable to pathogenic infections. And there's no surgery involved, so there's no risk from anaesthetic. However, there are also a number of disadvantages that need to be considered when a patient needs dialysis. They must carefully control their diet. They need to attend the hospital regularly. Using the dialysis machine takes a long time, between 4 and 8 hours, and the patients cannot move around. Before the next dialysis session, you may feel unwell due to a build-up of urea and excess mineral ions in your blood, and the balances of the substance in the blood becomes more difficult to control as you get older. Also, dialysis over time is more expensive than a kidney transplant. Particularly, this puts a burden upon the person if they're paying for their own treatments, or it puts an increased burden on the NHS. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you've learned in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.